How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Jimbo Power Show. Today we have Josh Steck. He's an ex paramedic and holistic nutritionist. So he does everything, but he is specifically focused on gut health and sort of how I'm assuming it's how the foods we ingest can sort of make us healthier, happier, better people. So, yeah, how you doing, Josh?
Hey Jimbo, I'm doing really good. That is a very overview term of things. There's a lot more to it for sure. I'm excited to get into about the gut and how it works and really the importance of it in our body, which I think more people really need to understand, like the depth of what it is.
Right. So, what is gut health? Because when I think of gut health, I think about a lot of things. I think about the gut feeling. I think about, the food we eat and how it may affect us and maybe cause things like inflammation or those types of things. Or what do you focus on and how is that sort of holistic in a sense?
Hmm. Well, gut health is pretty easy for the most part when it comes to symptomatology. That's what we call our basis of symptoms, how I feel or don't feel. And if somebody feels good, they eat food, they're eating good food, they're not bloated, they're not gassy, they don't stink when they pass gas, their bowel movements are normal, everything's healthy, you probably got a good gut. However, if you have other issues in the body, you're dealing with anxiety, depression, skin issues, irritability, sleeplessness, introversion can actually be a sign of poor gut health. Like our gut bacteria are arguably as important as our DNA. And so we can trace almost every medical condition on earth in some way, either back to the gut as a sole cause or a very notable contributing factor. And so it always has a role to play. So we're talking about gut health. How does my gut feel on the inside versus how is everything else managing for me?
Huh. Interesting. And what got you interested in gut health?
It was a bit of an accident, honestly. So I used to be a paramedic. That was my first career. And when I started doing that, I realized pretty quickly within the first couple of months, I picked up a lot of the same patients over and over for the same sicknesses, same conditions. And they just brought them to the hospital. They got an update on medication. They got sent home. And I realized very quickly we were performing sick care. We were not performing health care. And so after I left my career as a paramedic, I got into the fitness industry. I've been in there for years and decided I'll go all in. Let's do some personal training. And so training and nutrition are hand in hand. They always work together. And so I met when I got my first job there, I was working professionally for a gym. That was my full-time career. There was a lady who came to see me. She was 57 years old. She was on 17 pills and insulin for breakfast in the morning, 9 pills with more insulin at nighttime. She was taking all kinds of medications. She had blood pressure issues, borderline, what we call congestive heart failure. She slept with a CPAP machine. She was on disability at work, just in really medically very rough shape. I was 57 years old when she came to see me. By age 59, she broke her first world record as a weightlifter in the raw powerlifting division at that age division. And so this really started this journey of going deeper and deeper into the gut and digestion. One of the reasons gut was anchored for me, she did have a gastric bypass surgery, which they took 76% of her stomach. And so she had all kinds of gut issues. And I started exploring this and diving in, and we scienced the crap out of her stuff. And she kept breaking records all the way to age 61, 62 when she retired. And so that really set me off on the stage of what is the gut? How does it work? This is my early 20s. Went back to school, became a nutritionist, started diving more. And as time went on, I started seeing weight loss resistance where people can't lose weight, right? We're seeing a lot of that today. People just, no matter how many diets they try, how much they exercise, they don't lose weight. I was seeing PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. I was seeing a lot of respiratory distress, asthma, anxiety. And every time we address the gut, these things improve. People would lose weight. Their hormones would improve dramatically. Their asthma would go away. Their anxiety, depression would go away. And so I went all in on the gut. And then the more I did that, the worse and worse the gut diseases that came to see me, and the more connected we got in this world.
So I think there's, a lot of healthy foods out there. And, what are some of the healthy foods that are sort of banned in other countries?
Are you referring to some of the content I've made in the past? Um,
Yes.
there's a lot of reasons these foods are banned. And that's because they recognize in other countries, look at certain food dyes. We look at American imports of meat in particular. We look at a lot of these different things. They're banned because these other countries recognize them as the important ones. if you look at the amount of food dye in something like Fruit Loops, right? The UK and the EU, you have to put a warning label on them like we do with cigarettes in America. Right? In North America, we have a cigarette label that says, hey, if you ingest these, it causes cancer, it's inflammatory, it's this, it's that, makes you sick. They show pictures of fetuses and lungs, so you know how bad it is. They do the same with food dyes in a lot of places in Europe. And so they recognize they're bad for the brain, they're bad for the gut, they're bad for all kinds of things. They're carcinogenic in nature. A lot of these sweeteners, like artificial sweeteners, aspartame, highly neurotoxic. There was a case many years back of a girl in the States who was drinking 4 liters of Diet Coke a day, and she developed MS. So that's degeneration of nerves. It's called multiple sclerosis, where you basically lose this ability to use your nerves and move your body. And anyway, so she cut her Diet Coke, which was full of aspartame, and her MS symptoms began to go away, and they're alleviated because aspartame is neurotoxic. And these things affect your gut, your body, your nerves, your bacteria, wearing and tearing. And if we're messing up our bacteria, we're opening doors to things that even today we still don't fully understand. I argue our gut bacteria is as important as our DNA.
So you mentioned aspartame. So what about the more natural stuff like honey, or I'm not even sure, but stevia? I'm no expert here, but
Sure.
are those better?
Absolutely. Stevia, I'm actually a fan of for a lot of reasons. It's actually shown to be beneficial in a lot of ways. It's been shown to be beneficial in gut balancing or gut microbes. If there are situations where somebody might have excesses of biofilms, where they have too much bacteria producing too much of this mucousy stuff, it's protective until it's not. It can break down some of that. So they're much better options. Whereas honey, like proper honey, and that's the issue we have now in the States. A lot of these foods that we see, like honey, for example, is often mixed with high fructose corn syrup, which is one of the leading causes of fatty liver disease and will be, or predicted to be, for liver transplants by 2025, is this high fructose corn syrup we see in pop and all kinds. So it's not real honey, but real honey, quality honey from real bees, comes from the forest. They make it from flowers, no additives, has antimicrobial benefits, and it can be really good for you, provided you don't have a ton of overgrowth of bacteria that feed on sugar.
Wow, okay. So I'm going to assume you're also an advocate of maybe, I don't know, but maybe raw things like raw milk, raw cheeses too, or?
Absolutely. The thing about when we look at our food, we have to recognize that humans have survived for whatever you believe, thousands of years, millions of years, doesn't matter. We have survived from the beginning of time eating raw milk, eating raw things, eating things from trees, and eating ferments and all these foods. A lot of the stuff we have today, some of it hasn't existed more than 10, 20 years, some of it 50 or 100 years. There are certain oils that we have now, vegetable oil, canola oil, they never existed before. And we've seen a rise in disease. We look at the charts, they're just straight up, this climb like a roller coaster. And that comes from these new foods. Now, a lot of, nutritionists, a lot of scientists will say, well, the correlation does not equal causation. What that means is, even though we see the correlation, we can't say it's caused it for sure. But what else has changed, right? Our food is the biggest changer. The chemicals in our water, in our products, in our shampoos, like all these things, it creates a toxic burden. And it's almost as silly to me to deny this. There's a story that goes back. Every medical student that's ever graduated medical school knows the story of Ignaz Semmelweis. He was a Hungarian physician back in the 1950s. In 1956, they were doing some discovery, and he was trying to figure out why women kept dying in childbirth. And so he actually looked at 2 different pediatric wards. One was doctors, the other was just midwives and priests. And he found the one that had doctors, these women delivering babies, died at a rate 5 times higher than this other pediatric ward. You think doctors would be better, but it turns out these doctors were coming in with bloody clothes, working on emergencies and trauma. They were doing autopsies and using their same hands unclean after touching dead bodies and injuries to deliver babies. And they wondered why these women kept dying. It was called childbed fever. Ignaz Semmelweis said, why don't we start washing our hands? And the death rates dropped dramatically in the wards that he was overseeing. And they didn't like that. You'd think they'd celebrate, yay, look at this great thing. But they didn't want to be blamed for death. They didn't want to feel that they were dirty. And all the doctors, he got fired, lost his job, and ended up dying alone, many years later. And that obnoxiousness to deny the possibility, we can connect the dots to see the data. We cut these things out when you wash your hands. We can connect the dots and see the data today when we clean up our diets, when we change things out, when we take out these artificial fake foods we've had around for less than 50 years, people start getting better. We still have physicians and specialists going, yeah, well, we can't prove it. One day they're going to look as archaic and silly as these doctors in 1856.
Yeah. And I would say too, a lot of these retail companies also, it makes it so hard to access organic foods now, like raw milk, raw cheese, it can be very expensive. And a lot of times if you want raw milk, you have to actually buy the cow in some areas because it's illegal.
Mhm.
So how do you think some people can kind of bypass those cost efforts? Do you think people just need to make more money so they could shop at things like Whole Foods or
In some cases, unfortunately, that is the case, especially with inflation now. I mean, we're towards the end of 2023 here, and inflation's gone up so much. A lot of people who are struggling to make ends meet regularly, then you add 20, 30, 40% to groceries, 100% in some instances. They can't afford these things. And so, my recommendation, there are a lot of farmers out there who are looking for people to go farm to table. It really is. And there are a lot of places where it might not be as accessible. You're in New York, get some friends together, rent a car, drive out once a month, go pick up, half of a cow, cut it up, take it to a butcher. It's much cheaper than going to the store. And so there are options, but it's very difficult. And one of the challenges on top of finances is also convenience. People are busy, they got kids, they got jobs, they got stuff going on. And so as a system, we can blame the system. There's always a way around it. Get 10 friends together, start a group on Facebook, find people to partner with, and make this stuff happen. But for the most part, for your average day-to-day citizen, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to access good food. We also have things that we call food deserts. So people who live in areas where there's not huge amounts of accessible imports, it's expensive to bring in good quality foods. Maybe you're in a small town and things rot. Like food in 2023 is no more accessible than it was 500 years ago. It's just we have artificial food and there's money in fake foods. There's no money in real vegetables and meat and all that either. So it's a really messed up system and we are working an uphill battle.
no, well, food deserts are a big thing, especially in places like Detroit and Compton. Like if you look at the quality of the Safeways in more prestigious areas, it's very nice. But then if you look at these Safeways in these more poor communities, you could see that the places just are not as good. The food's just not as accessible, and the death rates and the mortality rates just go up.
Mhm.
So, you are just so right about that.
Well, it's interesting when we split some of the difference on that too, because there are a lot of diseases that are more common in poor communities due to the access of food, certain digestive issues, diabetes, things like that we see statistically. On the other hand, we have other autoimmune conditions, right, which are more dramatic. I'm actually lecture often on the difference between different digestive diseases. So looking at irritable bowel syndrome versus inflammatory bowel disease, right? Irritable bowel syndrome, we all know, bit of irritability, bloat, gas. IBD or inflammatory bowel disease is Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. So we're talking blood in the stool, severe pain, and it can inflame mouth to anus, like everything can become inflamed. We get ulceration, the works. And so we spent a lot of years in the medical community, spent a ton of years, probably 30 or so, trying to differentiate these two diseases and classify how they're different. I'm trying to blur those lines more and talk about how one can progress to the other. And we're seeing a lot of these diseases, these inflammatory bowel diseases, in more affluent communities. So it's considered the rich white people's disease in a lot of areas because think about it, the amount of maybe they're buying more produce. And that's the question now. They're buying more produce. Are they buying organic or are they not? So is it the pesticides or the artificial foods that are killing people or both? And in what ratios? How quickly? What damage is it doing? We know glyphosate is a pesticide that's horrific on your gut and gut bacteria. Well, your gut bacteria, I said earlier, they're as important as your DNA. They outnumber your body's own cells 10 to 1. We are our entire being, Jimbo. We are more bacteria, parasites, and fungi and viruses than we are actual cells and DNA. And so all these chemicals destroy that ecosystem that we have. And so that's interesting that these inflammatory bowel diseases of Crohn's and colitis are more like a rich white person's disease because they do come from more affluent communities. And that's the question. Is it the food? Is it the pesticides? Is it they're eating more vegetables or vegetables bad? I'm not a big fan of eating a ton of vegetables in a lot of instances. I do lean animal-based as a nutritionist. So there's all kinds of data we're still figuring out, and everyone's going to argue till the cows come home, no pun intended. And it's a really messy, confusing world out there for people. And I do feel for people who aren't actively in the health space trying to figure this stuff out. It's very difficult.
Oh, that's fascinating. So what is your diet like? I was assuming it would be a bit more, flexitarian, more greens than animal, but you seem big on animal products. What's your diet like?
Today I've had 2 steaks covered in butter so far.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of red meat, animal-based meats, organ meats, liver, kidney, heart, like eating these types of things, they're extremely nutritious. If we look at what we've been eating since the beginning of time, since humans walked the earth, the first things they would have eaten would have been meat because it was accessible. You can find an animal, hunt it, kill it, and we've been fine. And then the agricultural revolution started. And this is really interesting on my podcast, episode 15 with Dr. Anthony Chafee. He's a very well-known carnivore. And he was talking about, we can see through isotope technology what people were eating back 4,000 years ago through the agricultural revolutions in Egypt, and they're eating more grains and wheat than they were animal products. We can see these statues and the artwork and how soft people became, where body fat started to happen. And the old ancient scripts of medical literature that was being recorded at the time, they didn't have a word that was cardiac disease, but we can see in the literature where they would have had what correlates today to heart disease. We can see the symptoms. And so it looks like the evidence is showing, for those who are willing to look at it, the more grains and plants and other things people begin to eat, the softer, the fatter, the sicker we start to get. And it's actually the carnivore base, which we've been eating since the beginning of time, that we've seen this. We can back it up with info that's still alive today. I did another episode with Brian Sanders. He's got a documentary coming out called Food Lies. And he was talking about these tribes, these African tribes. He went over to visit, and he was going into these countries, and they don't know what heart disease is. They don't know what diabetes or obesity. They don't know what Alzheimer's is, all these things. But what do? They eat things off of trees, and they eat meat. They hunt baboons. They cut goats. They kill these animals. They eat the animals. But these animals, there's a lot of junk in vegetables and other things as well, which are dangerous to humans and dangerous to other things. Whenever something eats something it should not, it gets sick, right? When dogs eat dog food, they get goops under their eyes, their coats get really dry, their hair gets really gross. But if they eat meat and raw things and, carcasses, they are healthy. They have shiny coats. They have more energy. Their stools are a lot cleaner, not as smelly. Their breath doesn't stink as bad. And so if we have to go back to our roots, but unfortunately, there's been a big push lately, in my opinion. It's unfortunate for vegan, for plant-based, which is all just artificial chemicals anyway. And our traditional ancestral diets, in my opinion, are the best way to go.
I heard a little bit about meat only being traditional ancestor, this whole carnivore movement. I don't think I could do only meat, but, I think that's a really fascinating thing, because I think a lot of scientists will say it was only like the Neanderthals that ate only meat, and we didn't really do that so much. I'm not really an expert, but
yeah. Well, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, the Neanderthals would have, maybe they even ate each other. We don't know. We're only guessing, right? And so the technology we have, who knows how accurate it is? Even carbon dating, right? There were some instances like, this is 72 million years old based on carbon dating. Then they take something that was like 2 years old and it showed 50 million years. So who really knows? But we can say is that there are a lot of evidence out there for a lot of people who are eating a carnivore diet, strict carnivore. And I'm not. I still eat some fruits, and I'll have vegetables if we make a soup or go to my in-laws. But these animals are filters. So a lot of the junk that can be in these vegetables, a lot of these plant-based materials that could make people sick or cause low-grade inflammatory conditions filter through the animal. We eat the animal and we're good. And so again, we look at these affluent areas who eat a lot of plants and vegetables and things. Is it the pesticides? Is it the vegetables? What's making them sick and causing these diseases over time? That's the question to answer.
So the next big question I have is, can vitamin overdose cause death?
That one is also gray area. In some instances, we'll say absolutely. If someone has too much of something, your body's supposed to get rid of it. But we do know that there are toxic levels of certain things. We can say, well, vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin D. We can see toxicity if your levels go over X, Y, and Z, depending on the lab ranges we're using for blood work. But also, we have to keep in mind, your body should be able to excrete excess. Right? If you have a healthy kidney, healthy gut, healthy liver, healthy limbs, healthy skin, you're getting sunshine, you're contacting the earth, and you're discharging all these negative ions, and you're balancing your pHs, and basically living ancestrally, we'll have what we need, and your detox mechanisms can detox the excess. But if we look at B vitamins, look at the back of the next energy drink, 14,000% vitamin B12 of daily value. Take a B vitamin, 10,000% of, we got 50,000% of all these excesses of artificial vitamins anyway. And so again, is it the artificial vitamins causing the problem or the natural? right? Now, when we take reference ranges from blood work, and this is what gets interesting. If I were to look at blood work, for example, from a client of mine, one of them came in with thyroid issues. So we checked out a hormone. It's called TSH. It's thyroid stimulating hormone. And the normal reference range was 1.0 to 4.0. Okay, that was what it used to be. Now it's 1.0 to 6.5. So we've increased by 67% this lab value of what we allow to be normal. And so it's not what's optimal. What we're doing is sliding the scale of normal based on a population of people who are chronically ill. It's something like Dr. Joel Fuhrman had told me, it was something like 97%, give or take, of people are not metabolically healthy. Their BMIs aren't healthy due to a healthy body, but maybe to eating disorders, drug use, sickness, or something else. And so we have the vast majority, dramatic 90 plus 97% of people who aren't actually healthy by good standards. And so we're using our values and our reference ranges for blood work and dosing and vitamins and all these things based on a sick population, which can only skew the data. And so I would argue the best data we have, again, is indigenous tribes who still live on the land, who still walk around bare feet, who still farm and aren't living in high-rise buildings. I'm in an apartment. I'm surrounded by EMFs. These are things we have to consider as being different.
So, I think you mentioned a lot, this idea of following a more primal life, a more healthier life, So how do we actually make this a bit more sustainable? How do we, like for example, let me give like a really tough situation here. How do we kind of maintain gut health, maybe while traveling?
Well, those get really tricky. I mean, I went to the UK, a month ago now, 2 months ago, and I felt like garbage. It was very difficult for me to find good quality food. Right? I was in Ireland. I was in a little town of Donegal, about 4,000 people, and for a smaller town, they had great amount of access. They have sheep everywhere and cows and all kinds of farm animals. But even then, it was hard to go to a grocery store from going to Aldi or Lidl or something else. It's really hard to find quality food. Right. So it gets very challenging unless if I lived there, I wasn't there for 10 days passing through, I'd go and talk to farmers and make relationships that way. So when you're traveling, one of the best things would be prepared. That would be my advice. I was not prepared on this trip. I think, oh, we're going to Ireland. We're going to a small town. There'll be food there. There wasn't. Right. It was all packaged full of phosphates and full of all kinds of preservatives in these meats. And so what are nitrates, not phosphates, phosphates and nitrates. But we know sodium nitrate as a preserve in meat is actually on the carcinogen list next to plutonium and nicotine. So we know it causes problems, but it's in all these preserved meats. And so we're trying to find natural organic stuff. I bought a whole chicken, just made chicken soup. Right. So I was able to find things. But had I been better prepared, I would have gone into Facebook groups, local groups, try to figure something out that way. But if you're here for a day or two, man, it's really tough to travel, especially if you're on the road constantly. So I recommend dried foods. Bring in nuts, bring in dried fruits. Now, again, watch dried fruits. They're often covered in sugar and full of other junk, right? You have to go to a proper store. Beef jerky, but again, watch for teriyaki flavor full of sugar. So talk to a farmer or a butcher who makes jerky by themselves and it's high quality. It's often cheaper than Costco. And so there's a lot of things we can do, but it is preparation and moving out of comfort. I may not eat at restaurants anymore. I may not be able to go to a gas station and grab a snack out there because it's all junk anyway. And so we can change around from our comforts to going to what we need. That's a better option. But a lot of these things, they're always better than options. They're not always perfect.
So the crumpets and the fish and chips, that wasn't an option there,
I did have fish and chips. I did,
Yeah.
absolutely. I picked a lot of the batter off, but again, it's fried in like a
Lovely.
vegetable or canola or something else. And that's a really, really tough oil on the gut. And so we had fish and chips, and guess what? I was bloated. I felt like trash. And so next time I said, just bake it. Just give me a plain old filet. And so, you lose a lot of taste, but I think we often associate food with culture and fun and enjoyment, which is fine. But when it's always my taste buds over my health, that becomes an issue.
So I was kind of thinking here, if a person were to hypothetically ask you, why do my knees hurt when I squat? How would you talk to them about that regarding gut health? Is that connected to gut health in any way?
Quite a segue. I'm into that. So I actually just released an episode today on how your gut can influence your joints. But with my history working in as a strength coach and understanding, the mechanics, the physical mechanics of the body, there are two reasons why I'll see someone's knees hurt. And so I'll kind of hit those both really quick because I think it's relevant. And that's what I got to be careful with. I'm a nutritionist. I specialize in gut. Give me a hammer, everything looks like a nail, but it's multifaceted. If your knees hurt when you squat, it's probably the most common thing I see is a functional mechanical issue, which means you're using too much quad. And so I'm actually wearing shorts here so you can see. I'll bring this mic up. So for example, Jimbo, this muscle up top, right? So my quad, if this here is really tight, there's a tendon above and below my knee. So if that pulls, that tendon gets really tight and I put pressure, that knee can grind instead of gliding really nicely. So what I need is more hamstring activity. If my glutes and my hamstrings are working properly and functioning, I'm not distributing that weight forward. I'm not overusing my quads and straining my tendons, causing this grinding on my patella. And we can get that tissue loosened up. Foam rolling, acupuncture, dry needling. Chiropractic, make sure your spine is open so the nerves conduct to the glutes and hamstrings properly. That's number one. Number two, if your gut is leaky, absolutely, right? Leaky gut is a good thing, but it's a defense mechanism, but sustained leaky gut is a problem. And so if somebody comes to see me and I can tell they've got leaky gut, most people, if you're inflamed, do. What happens if say, for example, you eat something you shouldn't, right? You eat gluten. Gluten's really bad. Your body actually identifies gluten proteins as a pathogen, which is a dangerous bacteria, and it flags it when it comes in. It says, hey, this is a problem. It looks bad. So it creates leaks in the gut to draw water in like a hose on a driveway, and it flushes things out. And that's how we get rid of things. That's why people might drink something in 5 minutes, they got diarrhea. It's because the body created leaks. It was like, this is bad. Let's get rid of you. But if you have chronic inflammation, chronically bloated, these leaks become bigger and it becomes bidirectional. So not only does water come in to flush out, but things exit from your gut. Jimbo, your small intestine is one cell between your small intestine and your bloodstream. So things pass through very easily. Your blood and lymphatic, it's all connected in there. And so that leak, it's only 2 cells in your large intestine. So these leaks happen. Things start to leak out. Macromolecules that are too big to be into the blood. We get pathogens and bacteria and inflammatory things. We call these endotoxins, byproducts of bacteria. They get into the blood, they circulate around, they can get into your joints. And so if someone's having joint pain, stiffness, arthritis, their hips always hurt, their knuckles always hurt, they're always tight and stiff. If it's not a movement problem, it's probably a gut problem because all this toxicity is circulating in the system. So you want to look at leaky gut. You want to look at bacterial imbalances or pathogens is the next one we want to look at. So again, those endotoxins being created. There's all kinds of reasons why. Nutrient deficiencies, right? If your bacteria are out of balance. They're not producing nutrients that are anti-inflammatory. So we're not breaking down polyphenols or these anthocyanins. They're very antioxidant. If you're not making these short chain fatty acids in the gut, you're not getting lubrication in the joints. You're not getting these anti-inflammatory properties. We need all these things from the body. On another hand, if you have an inflamed gut, you're nutrient deficient because not only is our soil completely devoid of nutrients today, it's terrible. There are some studies suggesting you need 8 oranges today to get the same nutrients your great grandmother would have in 1 orange. And so we're depleted because we're not getting enough. And then we're stressed all the time, not just physical, psychological, but being sick, being bloated, that's a stressor, right? Technically, digesting food is a stressor. It's anything requiring excess nutrients from the body to perform actions, right? And so now we're nutrient deficient. We're burning through nutrients rapidly. We're not absorbing them and you're bloated. So even if you're taking supplements, you have this bloat, you have defective tissue, not getting nutrients in properly, you're in debt. So you start pulling it from other places. You pull nutrients, vitamins, minerals from your joints, from your teeth, from your skin, from your hair, and we start seeing breakdowns throughout the body.
That is very interesting because you mentioned digestion being a stressor. So what's your opinion on skipping meals? Fasting, there's all kinds of fasting now. You got all kinds of fasting, or you have people saying, no, we're not feasters, we're grazers. We need tons of small meals throughout the day. Do you skip meals, and how do you sort of prioritize your nutrition? Just to kind of wrap this up.
Sure. Yeah, I'll clarify about stressors and digestion. I mean, a stressor. There's distress and there's eustress, right? Eustress is like cramming for a deadline. You're really getting something done and it feels amazing. Distress is like my dad died and I'm in a really bad place. Like that's distress, right? So digestion is a stressor in the form that it requires a lot of energy to digest food. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, we want to digest. But as far as meals are concerned, personally, I do. I just came off a 48-hour fast. I did one earlier this week. My wife was sick, and I was like, I'm not getting sick. So I fasted 48 hours, didn't eat. That's great for the immune system. Your body can use up all that excess junk. Um, for me, I prefer to eat 2, 3 times a day. I do advocate for intermittent, like an 8-hour window. And a lot of that has to do with our cells and mitochondrial health. In your mitochondria, they're often thought to be just like we refer to them a lot as just the powerhouse, the battery of the cell, or the battery of um, the body, really. And so it takes at least 12 hours of non-consumption of food for these mitochondria to start turning up and producing excessive energy so you can be more energized during the day. You'll be prone to noticing there are a lot of people who eat like grazers and they're kind of sluggish all the time, especially if you're eating junk or you're picking. Grazers tend to be more overweight because it's hard to manage how much you're actually consuming or what you're consuming. I'm an advocate for, 8-hour window, 6 hours. Again, as a strength athlete, for me, I'm going in. I taekwondo a couple nights a week. I'm on the rings, gymnastics rings for my workouts and stuff like that. So I need to get enough calories. I can't do it in 2 hours. I got to eat over 8 if I want to get at least 3,000 calories. Otherwise, I feel sluggish, right, because of the level of activity. But then if people have severe gut issues, trying to eat in a 2-hour window is really tough. Because picture taking someone who's never gone for a run before. They sat on their couch for the last 10 years. You're like, cool, go run a marathon. It's a lot of work on a system not capable of doing it. And so people who have digestive issues or are inflamed, they're not capable of actively digesting these things in these large amounts. We need to give them some smaller breaks. So my clients with gut disease like Crohn's colitis and severe IBS, I will give them 4 meals a day to spread things out because that's our priority.
Very interesting. And kind of, this has been an amazing interview. Just to end this off here, how do you think we could get people to sort of prioritize their gut health, prioritize nutrition? Do you have any basic advice you could sort of throw out there to kind of wrap this up?
Yeah, I mean, we got to get educated, right? Like I said,
Mm.
your gut's more important than your DNA. We can connect gut health to 93% of the leading causes of death in North America. We know our gut bacteria outnumber our own cells 10 to 1. They're integrated and woven into every aspect of our being. We are what we break down, digest, and absorb, and our gut bacteria are everything. We can predict certain diseases and disease pathways and patterns based on the bacteria in your gut profile. We know all these things. And so there's so much to it that we just need to learn and have some reverence for. We know drinking that drink of alcohol, here's what it's going to do to my gut. Whether you do it or not, that's fine. It's up to you. But you should know what's happening when you do it. When you consume that ibuprofen instead of maybe a more natural or an herbal-based anti-inflammatory, know what it's doing to your body and how it's affecting your gut. And that's really what my podcast is all about. It's all about the ways the gut is connected to every aspect of our lives.
Excellent. Now, speaking of your podcast, how can we reach out to you? What are your social media outlets? Maybe a bit more on your podcast. Do you have, Twitter, Facebook, social media,
Yeah, I'm on
website?
Facebook. I got some groups on Facebook for sure. The best way to get in touch, just to keep things simple, would be to look up ReversABLE. You do have it across the bottom. It's called ReversABLE, the Ultimate Gut Health Podcast. And what that is, it's just about making sure we're happy, we're healthy. We have some of the world's best doctors and influential personalities. If you actually head over to the top there of that website, you can go to the episodes and you'll see some of the guests that we've had. It's at the very, very top of the webpage. Yeah, scroll all the way. That's right. You'll find it. Anyway, so at the top of the page, we have a tab you can click. It's in the top right. It's called
Yeah.
episodes. And you'll see we have some of the world's best. We have Dr. Stephen Gundry. We have William Lee. We've got Mindy Pels. We've had Lisa Bilyeu coming on to talk about it. Just the best of the best on earth to talk about their take on the gut, why it's so important, how it works, how to keep it healthy, what's causing these problems. And it's just an amazing, amazing show. And I've just been so blessed to meet with these people and talk to them. They're in the world are leading the charge on gut health and everything connected to it. And so it's been a pleasure to have them on.
Excellent. So this has been a great pleasure. Thank you again, Josh, for being on the show. And I'll be seeing you all next time.
Appreciate you having me, Jimbo.
I'm currently working on a passion project that I'm really excited about, but I need your help to bring it to life. We will be launching soon our very own Jimbo Paris Academy, and this is going to be about aspiring creators and creating concepts. Thank you for your support. I'm sharing free bonus content to supporters, so let's make some amazing content together.